My husband gave me two choices: watch him sleep with his ex or stay out of his way, while he did it anyway. I picked option 3 and told him to start packing before I rearranged her face. I had no idea what hit me. When Ethan said those words, I felt like the world around me cracked. Just for a moment. I was standing in the kitchen, in our home, in my own life, and then suddenly, nothing made sense. The house felt too quiet. I could hear my pulse in my ears, the sound of it pounding in my head, fighting to drown out the calm, cold tone of his voice. I stood there for a moment, staring at him. Ethan, my husband of 5 years, was leaning against the counter, arms crossed like he'd been waiting for this moment. The crisp button-down shirt, the freshly styled hair, the look in his eyes, everything about him screamed, "I've already made up my mind. And you don't have a say." His posture was a wall, but the words he spoke shattered it into a million pieces. "You look formal for a Tuesday," I said, my voice betraying the hint of nervousness I couldn't push away. I tried to keep it light, but I knew, he knew, that this was no casual conversation. Ethan didn't smile. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he gave me that look. The one where he was a little too sure of himself. "We need to talk," he said. It wasn't an invitation. It was an ultimatum. I wanted to scream, to argue, to throw something, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, twisted off the cap, and drank slowly, letting the cool liquid settle the rising knot in my stomach. My mind was already spinning, trying to make sense of the chaos. My fingers itched, wanting to pull out the phone and check the calendar, the messages, the usual rhythm of our life. I couldn't. Not yet. But I knew something was wrong. "So, what's going on?" I asked, setting the bottle down, trying to keep my voice steady. He took a breath, like he was about to say something profound. "You know, this life doesn't really work for me anymore," he said, his eyes looking through me, not at me. "The routine, the traditional stuff. I'm starting to feel like our relationship is just stuck. I'm bored. Sienna. I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of work on myself, and I'm realizing that monogamy is kind of a social construct." I blinked, the words hitting me like a slap, one by one, each one slower than the last, as if my brain couldn't catch up. "Come again?" I asked, my voice rough. It didn't even sound like a question anymore. He barely seemed to notice my confusion. His gaze was still distant, almost practiced. "I want to explore something with Sasha," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sasha. His ex-girlfriend from college. The one I had always known was a little too close for comfort. The one whose name I'd seen on his phone too many times in the early days of our marriage, until he'd finally cut contact. But now, she was back. "My ex," he added, as if it needed further clarification. "You know her?" "Yeah, Ethan," I said slowly, my voice tightening. "I know who Sasha is." There was a pause, like he was waiting for me to respond. Like I should have been on board with this twisted little revelation. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mind was still processing, fighting the rising anger that was starting to claw its way to the surface. "So here are the options," he continued, folding his arms tighter across his chest. "You can accept that I want to explore this connection with her, and we can figure out how to make that work in a conscious, ethical way. Or you can stay out of the way while I do it, Because I'm not willing to keep shrinking myself in this box we built. I stared at him, the audacity of it. He thought I had two choices, either play along or step aside. I had spent 12 hours on my feet at the shop, covered in grease, fighting with stubborn parts and back orders. I had worked my ass off, doing everything to keep our life steady. And this was what I got in return. A choice between accepting my husband's affair or walking away from everything we'd built. Are you serious? I managed to say the words low and tight. This isn't a spur of the moment thing, Sienna, he said. His voice almost annoyed that I wasn't seeing the brilliance in his plan. It's a journey. I've been expanding my consciousness for months now. Reading, listening to experts, talking to people who've done it. I let the silence hang between us. My brain was trying to process the fact that the man I'd spent years with, the man I had supported through his ups and downs, was now telling me that everything we had was a prison, a box. And the only way out was for me to give him permission to sleep with his ex. How long have you and Sasha been talking? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His jaw tightened. A few months. It's mostly been spiritual, emotional. She understands parts of me you just don't. There it was. The cruelty wrapped in self-help jargon, the soft, smug words that made it sound like he was doing me a favor by including me in his enlightened decision. I stood still, trying to swallow the hurt, but it was hard. And you're telling me this is what? I asked. An opportunity for me to grow. He smiled. Yes, he said, his eyes lighting up. I'm not betraying you. I'm being transparent. I want you to have the chance to evolve with me. To move beyond jealousy and possessiveness. I watched him for a long moment, trying to stop the storm brewing in my chest. On the surface, he looked calm, thoughtful, like a podcast guest explaining his latest epiphany. But underneath, I saw the truth. He wasn't asking for permission. He was telling me what I was going to accept. I took a breath. So, to recap, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. You want to sleep with your ex-girlfriend. If I say no, you're going to do it anyway. He nodded, not a hint of guilt. But if you say yes, then I get to be evolved and conscious about watching you do it. It took everything in me not to laugh. It wasn't funny. It was pathetic, but I didn't laugh. Instead, I smiled. A smile that wasn't happy, but something else, something colder. Okay? I said softly, I hear you. Relief washed over his face. He thought that was agreement. I'm not saying I'm okay with it, I added. But I'm processing. This is a lot. He stepped toward me, his expression softening into that patronizing tenderness. Thank you for being open-minded about this, he said. It means a lot that you're even willing to consider it. Sure, I thought. You've been doing a lot of work on yourself. I wouldn't want to stifle that. He didn't hear the edge in my voice. Or maybe he chose not to. That night, Ethan went to bed in our room like everything was fine. Like he hadn't just shattered everything I'd known about us. I slept in the spare room, claiming my back hurt from work. But that wasn't the reason. I couldn't sleep in that bed with him anymore. Not after what he said. Not after what he thought was my choice. I lay awake in the dark. The weight of his words pressing down on me. I didn't know what to do yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let him destroy me. Not without a fight. I spent the rest of the night in the spare room, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. The silence in the house was deafening. I kept replaying Ethan's words in my head, each one cutting deeper than the last. You can accept that I want to explore something with Sasha, or you can stay out of the way while I do it. The way he said it, so calmly, as if he were giving me a choice between two normal, everyday decisions, was what hurt the most. Like this was just some philosophical debate, not a devastating betrayal. I kept waiting for the anger to hit. But it didn't. At least not right away. What I felt was numbness. A quiet disbelief. How did we get here? I thought we had everything worked out. Sure, there were times I felt lonely in the marriage. Moments when I wished he would pay more attention to me, or that we could do more together outside of our work routine. But I never thought he would do this. I stayed in bed, eyes wide open in the dark, trying to figure out my next move. I couldn't just sit here and let him get away with it. But what did I even want? What did I deserve? It was morning before I could force myself to get up. I hadn't slept a wink, but I had work to do. The shop wouldn't run itself. As I pulled on my boots and grabbed my jacket, I tried to shake off the weight of what had happened. There was a job to be done. There always was. The smell of gasoline and metal hit me as soon as I walked into the shop. The noise of the engines, the whir of tools, the rhythmic hum of machinery, this was where I felt like myself. But even here, the ache in my chest wouldn't go away. Every bolt I tightened, every part I worked on, felt like it belonged to someone else. The old me. The one who wasn't dealing with betrayal. I focused on the work, kept my head down, but the thoughts kept circling back to Ethan. I could still hear his voice in my head, the way he made everything sound so enlightened. I've been expanding my consciousness, he'd said. Monogamy is a social construct. Those words kept echoing, reverberating in my mind. How had I been so blind? I had trusted him. And now I was left trying to figure out what to do with that trust. Now shattered on the floor. My crew noticed my quiet mood, but they didn't press. I liked it that way. I didn't want to talk about it. Not yet. Not with anyone. They'd all seen me through some tough times, but this was different. This was my marriage falling apart in real time. And I wasn't ready to tell them that. Around lunch, I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped out into the fresh air. I needed a moment, away from the noise. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through contacts without thinking. My thumb hovered over Jessica's name. She was always there for me, always the one to tell me what I needed to hear. No matter how much I didn't want to hear it. She'd been my rock for years, always keeping me grounded. Especially when Ethan and I had gone through those rough patches early on. I hit call before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Yo, wrench queen," she said, her voice light and teasing, as always. "What's up?" I exhaled, trying to force the words out. "I need to talk." There was a brief pause on the other end. "In person, yeah," I said. "Pretty bad." She didn't hesitate. "Okay. I'm on my way. Bring your coffee. I'll be there in 30. I leaned back against the building, the cool breeze doing little to calm the storm inside me. I wasn't sure what I was even going to say to her. But I knew I needed someone. Someone who could look at this from the outside and give me a clear answer. Not just the sympathy I expected from family or the usual. It'll be okay. I needed someone to tell me the truth, without holding back. As I waited, I found myself staring out at the shop, the place I had poured my heart into for so many years. It was supposed to be my safe place. But now, everything felt off, like a machine that wasn't running right. I thought about what Ethan had said, how we were stuck in this traditional life, how he was expanding himself, finding new connections. But all I saw was a man who had stopped giving a damn about the life we built together. Jessica showed up, just like she said she would, with coffee in hand, her usual cheerful grin plastered on her face. She was in her late 20s, but she had an energy about her that made her seem older, wiser somehow. She was strong, independent, and the kind of person who didn't sugarcoat things. Exactly what I needed right now. You ready to unload? She asked, before I could say anything. I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, I guess it's time. She stepped closer, and we sat down on the bench outside the shop. I could feel her waiting, letting me speak when I was ready. I took a deep breath. Ethan. He wants to sleep with his ex. Jessica didn't blink. She just nodded, as if she'd expected it. Okay. Go on. He says it's part of his spiritual growth. That monogamy is a social construct, I said, feeling the sting of it all over again, as I spoke the words aloud. He says he needs to be honest with me, wants me to either accept it or stay out of his way. Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't interrupt. Instead, she let me keep talking, let me work through the mess of it all. I don't know what to do, Jess. I continued. It's like he just gave up on everything. On us. She was silent for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. You're right. He gave up. But you don't have to give up on yourself. I took another breath, feeling the weight of her words sink in. Maybe that was the thing. Maybe I had been so caught up in trying to make it work that I forgot to think about what I've wanted. You deserve more than this, she added. You deserve someone who sees you, not just someone to fill in the gaps when they need a break from their own mess. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of something other than numbness. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was something else. Something that made me feel like I wasn't alone in this. Yeah, I whispered, the weight of it all pressing against my chest. I think I do. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to keep up with work, while my mind was constantly turning over what Ethan had said. Every time I picked up a wrench or welded a frame, I couldn't stop thinking about him. About Sasha. About the life I thought we had. Every little detail felt like a slap. The way he looked at me, when he said he wasn't happy. How easily he dismissed everything we built. But even with the weight of it all pressing on me, I couldn't just stop everything. The shop was my lifeline. My business, my passion, it was the one thing I could control. And right now, it felt like the only thing that still made sense. I kept working, hands steady as I tightened bolts and shaped metal, but inside, I was unraveling. Ethan wasn't the only one who had a plan. I had my own. Slowly, I started gathering evidence, each piece more damning than the last. Every text, every calendar entry, things I hadn't noticed before. Things that now felt like a betrayal. I had no idea how deep this went, but I was going to find out. I couldn't just sit here and let him walk all over me. It was a Sunday when I finally decided to take the first step. Ethan had been quiet over the past few days, probably convinced that I was still processing, still deciding what to do. But I wasn't processing anymore. I was planning. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the calendar. It was a mess of color-coded entries, personal development, Sasha. Week after week, there it was. Every Wednesday, same time, same place. 2 hours of whatever it was he thought was expanding his mind. He'd always been a little too invested in this self-help stuff, but this was different. It wasn't just meditation and yoga. This was something else. I could feel the anger creeping in again, a slow burn. The more I found, the more it made sense. The more I saw it for what it was, a calculated betrayal. I screenshot everything, carefully, methodically. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. I wanted to. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, scream, ask him how long he thought he could hide this from me. But I didn't. I kept my emotions in check, just like I always did. Once I had all the screenshots, I moved on to the messages. His texts to Sasha were casual at first, just little check-ins, a link to a podcast here, a joke about work there. But as the weeks went on, they got more intense, more personal. There were inside jokes, plans to meet up, things I had no idea about. Then, I hit the voice memos. I'd never listened to them before. I hadn't had a reason to. But now, with everything else I'd uncovered, I couldn't avoid them any longer. I tapped the first one. Ethan's voice came through the speakers, low and intimate. He was talking to Sasha, telling her that he hadn't been happy for years, that he'd just been going through the motions with me, that everything had become comfortable. My stomach twisted, but I kept listening. I've just been going through the motions, he said. You see parts of me, Sienna, never tried to understand. I closed my eyes. His words hit me like a physical blow. How could he say that? How could he speak about me like I was just someone who was comfortable? Someone who didn't challenge him. I swallowed hard and tapped the next voice memo. This time, it was from Sasha. She was talking about how scared she was to let go of her old life, but that she knew it was the right thing to do. She was encouraging him, telling him that he deserved more than what he had with me. That he needed to be free, just like her. I had to stop. My hands were shaking now, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. This was it. This was everything I needed to make sure I wasn't the one left with nothing. The next memo was worse. I hesitated before I hit play. It was a conversation between Ethan and Toby, his younger brother. I'd always known that the two of them weren't exactly close, but this was beyond anything I expected. So, does she know? Toby asked, laughing as if it were a joke. Ethan's voice came back, tight and strained. What are you talking about? Toby didn't hesitate. You said you didn't believe in ownership. That if connection is authentic, there's enough love to go around. I thought that meant. His voice trailed off, like he was trying to gauge Ethan's reaction. Ethan's voice was low, almost a growl. You're sleeping with her. For like 3 weeks now. Toby said, like it was no big deal. I thought you knew, man. I could hear Ethan's shock in the silence that followed. What the hell? He muttered. Chill, bro. Toby laughed. This is just part of the journey, right? We're all expanding. She's into the same thing you are. My heart slammed against my ribs. Toby, Ethan's brother. He'd been sleeping with Sasha behind my back too. They had been laughing at me. Using me. I hit pause. The anger I'd been holding back exploded. It wasn't just betrayal now. It was mockery. They thought I wouldn't find out. They thought they could keep me in the dark while they built their little world, tearing apart the one I thought we had. I set the phone down and took a deep breath. It was time to make a decision. I wasn't going to sit here and let them ruin me. I was going to fight back. I grabbed the phone again, not for the texts or the calendar, but to reach out to someone who could help, someone who wasn't emotionally involved. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. Jessica had told me I deserved better, and maybe she was right. But right now, I needed more than just words of comfort. I needed strategy. I needed proof. And most of all, I needed to remind myself that I wasn't helpless in this. Not anymore. The next few days passed in a blur of work and silence. Ethan kept his distance, like he was giving me space to process. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't processing anymore. I was plotting. I was making plans, gathering my resources, and slowly, but surely, starting to see the pieces fall into place. I didn't talk to him much. Every time he came home, I kept myself busy with work, with whatever I could do to avoid the tight, uncomfortable conversations he kept trying to start. He'd come in, ask how my day was, like we were still in the same world, and I'd answer with a polite smile. But that was it. It wasn't enough to keep up the facade. I couldn't let this go. Not now that I knew. Not now that I understood how far Ethan had gone behind my back. The day I decided to call the lawyer, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. Like I'd crossed a line, one I couldn't uncross. But it was okay. It had to be. I couldn't keep walking this tightrope of uncertainty. I needed something solid. I needed to move forward. Even if I didn't know exactly what the end would look like. I grabbed the prenup. Ethan had insisted on it when we got married, saying it was for his family's protection. I hadn't thought twice about it at the time. He'd reassured me that it was just a formality. Something his parents insisted on because of some inheritance. But now, it felt like a weapon. A carefully crafted weapon. Hidden away for a reason I never understood. I opened the folder slowly, skimming the pages. My hands were steady. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about strategy. As I read, the reality of what was happening began to hit me again. I was doing this. I was going to take him down. Not for revenge, though that was part of it, but for justice. For myself. The woman who had built this life. Who had worked her ass off while Ethan flitted between find yourself phases, was now being handed the keys to her own future. The key clause came on page 8, in plain black and white. Infidelity clause. If either party engaged in extramarital affairs during the marriage, the faithful spouse retained full ownership of the primary residence, all jointly purchased vehicles, and all marital assets acquired during the marriage. The unfaithful party would forfeit all claims to these assets and would be responsible for their own legal fees. I read it twice, just to be sure. This was it. This was the silver bullet. I felt a strange sense of relief. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about hurting Ethan. At least, not directly. This was about ensuring that I didn't lose everything I'd worked so hard for. That I didn't walk away with nothing. This was about making sure he faced the consequences of his actions. I put the prenup back in the folder and closed it, my mind already racing through the next steps. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone outside of all of it, someone who could help me make the right moves. I needed a lawyer. The next morning, I made the call. It was quick, efficient. The receptionist was polite, setting up an appointment for the following day. I hung up the phone, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This was happening. I was taking control. As I walked back into the shop, the familiar hum of the engines and the sound of tools clinking together filled the air. But something felt different today. Maybe it was because I knew that, for the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one in the dark. I wasn't the one waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was making the choice. By noon, I found myself walking into the office of Clean, Weaver, and Hunt, the law firm I'd found online. The reception area smelled like citrus cleaner and fresh leather. It was clean, pristine. Exactly what you'd expect from a place that dealt in family law. I handed over the folder with the prenup to the receptionist, and she led me to a private office, a large, oak desk in the center. The man behind it looked to be in his 50s, his glasses perched on the end of his nose. His suit was sharp, tailored to perfection, but his eyes were kind, sharp but kind, like someone who had seen it all and wasn't fazed by much anymore. "You must be Sienna," he said as he stood up to greet me. I nodded, suddenly feeling small. But I didn't let it show. Not today. "I'm David Clean," he said, shaking my hand. "Please, have a seat." I sat down, still clutching the prenup. He took his time, settling into his chair, folding his hands together in front of him. "Now, what can I help you with?" "I need a divorce," I said. The words came out clear and firm. I was done. David didn't blink. He just nodded and gestured for me to continue. I told him everything. Ethan's confession, his betrayal, the evidence I had gathered, the voice memos, the text messages, the calendar entries. I didn't hold anything back. When I was done, David leaned back in his chair, not a hint of surprise on his face. He just listened, making notes, as if this was just another case for him. But I wasn't just another case. This was my life. "So? I see you've done some homework," he said. "That's good. We're in a strong position here." I didn't feel strong. I felt like I had been hit with a brick wall, and now I was just cleaning up the mess. But his confidence gave me something to hold on to. David flipped through the pages of the prenup, reading quickly until he hit the infidelity clause. His eyes paused for a moment, then he set the document down and looked at me. "Well, Sienna," he said slowly. "I can't say it enough, this changes everything." I nodded. He was right, it did. The next few days passed in a haze. Ethan stayed out of the way, acting like everything was normal, probably hoping I'd eventually come around to his enlightened idea of our marriage. I went about my routine as usual, work, breakfast, dinner, all the while holding everything in, keeping my emotions locked away behind a practiced calm. But inside, I was boiling. Every time he came home, all I could think about was his cold, calculated confession. "You can accept this, or stay out of the way while I do it." I kept replaying those words in my head, each time feeling more like a punch in the gut. I couldn't keep pretending I was okay. Every time I picked up a tool or welded a frame, my mind was somewhere else. I had to take action. I had to do something. I wasn't just going to let him walk all over me. And if he thought I would just stand by and let him destroy everything, he was wrong. By the time I went to the lawyer, I had already made up my mind. I was done being the dutiful wife. The obedient one. I didn't want to just keep the peace. I wanted justice. I wanted to be free of him, and the mess he dragged me into. It was a Friday when I called David, the lawyer, to confirm everything. He was calm and reassuring, telling me he'd have the paperwork ready soon. I nodded through the call, holding the phone tight in my hand, as if I could somehow hold on to the last thread of control in my life. I needed to stay focused. This wasn't just about getting back at Ethan. It was about taking back what was mine. The business, the house, my independence, all of it had been earned by me, not him. But that didn't stop the tight knot of anxiety in my stomach as the days passed. Ethan was completely unaware of what was coming. He probably thought I was just going to let him do whatever he wanted. Just like I had for the last few years. I could already see it in his eyes, the smugness. The belief that he had all the power. It was Sunday afternoon when the paperwork arrived at my doorstep. The package was thick, filled with all the documents. I'd need to get the ball rolling. My heart beat faster as I opened the envelope, flipping through each page, until I found the one I needed. The divorce petition was straightforward. But the prenup, that was the real prize. The infidelity clause. It was the key to everything. I wasn't just walking away with nothing. I was going to get what was rightfully mine. The next day, I was at the shop, hands steady as I worked. But my mind was a storm. I could hear Ethan's voice from the other room, calling out to me like everything was fine, asking if I wanted to grab dinner later. I didn't answer. I knew he expected me to cave, to somehow forgive him or let him off the hook. He had no idea what I was about to do. No idea how much I had already planned. I wasn't going to just let him waltz back into my life, like nothing had changed. Later that afternoon, as the shop was winding down, I sent a quick message to Jessica. She hadn't asked for updates since our talk. But I needed someone to talk to, someone who could keep me grounded. I was about to do something that would change everything. Everything's set, I wrote. The lawyer's ready to file. Jessica replied immediately. You're doing the right thing. I'm proud of you. I felt the weight of her words, but they didn't give me the relief I thought they would. Instead, they made me feel stronger, more sure of myself. This was it. There was no going back. Ethan came home late that night, like he usually did. He had a bag in his hand, the same one he always carried when he went to his spiritual retreats. He didn't even notice the new tension in the air. He walked in, dropped his bag by the door, and smiled at me like everything was fine. I didn't smile back. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision. How was your day? He asked, dropping into the chair across from me. I didn't answer immediately. I could feel my pulse in my ears, but I kept my face neutral. I'm not sure how much longer I can do this, I said finally, my voice calm, but the words still heavy in the space between us. Ethan's smile faltered. What do you mean? You've already made your choice, I said. Now, I'm making mine. His face twisted with confusion. Sienna, what's going on? I stood up slowly, my heart racing in my chest. I'm done, Ethan. We're done. I saw the shock hit him in real time. The smugness, the confidence, it all faded away as reality set in. He stood up quickly, taking a step toward me. We can work this out, okay? We can figure it out. I shook my head. No, we can't. His face was a mix of disbelief and panic. He looked like he wanted to beg, to plead with me, but I wasn't having it. Not anymore. I've already called a lawyer, I added. Everything's in motion. For a moment, he was silent. His eyes were wide, searching my face for some sign that this was a joke, that I wasn't really going to go through with it. But there was nothing left to say. I'll be gone by the morning, I said, my voice steady. Take your time to pack. He didn't move, he just stood there, frozen. I turned and walked out of the room, the finality of my decision settling over me, like a heavy cloak. The house felt quieter now. There was no arguing, no empty promises, just silence. And for the first time in days, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was the beginning. The first step toward something new. Something just for me. The next morning was quiet, too quiet. Ethan didn't wake up to say goodbye. He didn't try to argue or convince me to change my mind. It was like he already knew. Like he already understood that everything had shifted beyond his control. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Not fully. The silence in the house was almost suffocating, and I realized that, for all the anger I had toward him, there was still a part of me that mourned the life we'd shared. Or at least the life I thought we had. The quietness seemed to fill every corner, and in some ways, I felt emptier than I had the day before. I went about my usual routine, the one I'd carefully built over the years. I dressed quickly, threw my hair into a messy bun, and grabbed my keys. The shop was waiting for me, and it always had been my escape. But today, even the familiar sound of the engines, and the smell of metal and grace couldn't quite drown out the storm in my chest. When I arrived at the shop, I tried to focus, tried to throw myself into the work. But my mind kept drifting back to the conversation, to the reality of the divorce papers that would soon arrive, to the fact that Ethan had no idea how much of this I'd already planned. He thought I was still processing. He thought he could walk away from the wreckage without a second thought. But the wreckage was mine to deal with. And I was done letting him dictate how I felt about it. I didn't wait for him to come home that night. By the time I returned, he was already gone. The house felt colder without him, but there was a strange sense of relief too. No more pretending. No more acting like everything was fine. No more feeling like I had to apologize for wanting something real. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the conversation with the lawyer in my mind. David had been calm, professional, and thorough. He'd walked me through the process step by step, explaining how everything would unfold. The evidence I had collected, the texts, the voice memos, the calendar entries, were more than enough to ensure that I wouldn't walk away empty-handed. But what struck me the most was the prenup. The infidelity clause. Ethan had signed it, never once thinking it would come back to haunt him. He thought he could do whatever he wanted, that I would just accept it. But I wasn't going to let him. The next few days passed slowly, but I stayed focused. I kept to my routine, kept working on the bikes, kept pushing forward. I knew the papers would be filed soon. I knew that Ethan would start to panic when he realized what was happening. But that wasn't my problem anymore. The hardest part, though, was when Ethan's parents tried to reach me. It was his mother, Marilyn, at first, calling me late one evening, her voice filled with concern. "Sienna, sweetheart, I think there's been some sort of misunderstanding. Ethan is devastated. Please, just talk to him. I didn't pick up. I wasn't interested in hearing his family's excuses for him. They hadn't been there for me when I was doing all the heavy lifting in the relationship. And now, they thought they could come in and fix everything with a phone call. I didn't think so. The next day, I found myself standing in front of the lawyer's office once again. But this time, the documents were ready. David had everything prepared, and he handed me the stack of papers like they were just another part of the process. I signed them without hesitation. Each stroke of the pen felt like a final goodbye to the man who had once promised to love me, who had once been the center of my world. As I left the office, the weight on my shoulders seemed to lift a little more. I was walking away from the years of compromise, the years of bending and breaking for someone who never really saw me. And that felt like a kind of freedom. I didn't waste any time. I called Jessica right after I left the lawyer's office. Everything's in motion, I told her. It's done. She was quiet for a beat before responding. You sure about this? I didn't have to think about it. Yes. It's time. Jessica was silent for a moment. Then she said, You deserve so much better, Sienna. Don't ever forget that. I won't, I said softly, smiling to myself as I hung up. She was right. I did deserve better. The next day, Ethan tried to reach me. I ignored his calls. He texted me later, asking if we could talk. I still didn't answer. But then, a text came through from an unknown number. It was from Toby. We should talk, it said. Family meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m. Mom's house. Be there. I stared at the screen, the message making my blood run cold. It was clear they thought they could fix this. That I was going to walk back into the life I had spent years building with Ethan. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. When the time came, I found myself sitting in the back of a cab, heading toward Marilyn and Peter's house. My heart beat steadily in my chest, but my mind was focused. I wasn't going there to beg for answers or apologize for my choices. I was going to let them see the woman I had become. The woman who was done being a doormat. When I arrived, I walked into their home like I owned the place. Marilyn opened the door with a forced smile, trying to look like everything was fine. I could already see the tension in her eyes, the worry about what Ethan had done. Sienna, she said, her voice thick with false concern. Come in. I stepped inside, feeling the weight of their gaze on me. Peter was sitting in his usual recliner, arms folded, his face a mixture of disbelief and irritation. Toby was on the couch, his eyes avoiding mine. Ethan was standing near the door, his face pale and anxious, like he'd been caught in a trap. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, looking at each of them. Finally, Peter cleared his throat. Thank you for coming, Sienna, he said, trying to be polite. We just want to understand what's going on here. I took a deep breath and said, You know, I've been listening to all of you for a long time. I've been the one trying to make things work, trying to keep everything together. But the truth is, Ethan made his choice. He chose Sasha, and he chose a life without me. The room was silent as I continued. And now, I'm choosing for myself. We're done. There's nothing left to fix. The silence in the room felt like a heavy weight, pressing down on my chest. As I stood there, Facing Ethan's family, I realized just how much of my life I had spent pretending. Pretending to be someone I wasn't. Pretending everything was okay, when all along, the cracks were forming beneath the surface. Ethan's mother, Marilyn, looked at me with wide eyes, her hands trembling as she clasped them together in her lap. "Sienna, sweetheart," she said, her voice cracking. "This isn't the way to handle this. We're family, we should be talking this through." I couldn't help but laugh, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was bitter. "Family. Is that what you think we are?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "You and Peter pushed me into this marriage with your prenup, never once thinking about what I might want or need. You always thought Ethan's happiness was the only thing that mattered." Marilyn opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "Don't. Not this time. I've spent years walking on eggshells, trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, in-law, the perfect person. But all of that has been a lie. Ethan didn't just betray me, he betrayed everything we built together." Ethan's face was ashen, his mouth opening and closing, like he was trying to find words, but nothing came out. I saw the panic in his eyes, the realization that the walls were closing in around him. But it wasn't just panic, there was something else there too. Regret. Guilt. He knew, deep down, that he had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "You don't get to ask me to forgive you," I continued, my voice rising slightly. "You don't get to tear apart our lives, and then expect me to just accept it, to move on like nothing happened." Toby, who had been sitting quietly on the couch, suddenly stood up, his face twisted in frustration. "You don't understand," he said, his voice harsh. "Ethan's trying to better himself. This is part of his journey. He's evolving, Sienna. You should be supporting him." I looked at him, my eyes narrowing. "Evolving?" I repeated, my voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "By sleeping with his ex and dragging me through this mess. That's your idea of evolving?" Toby didn't answer. Instead, he stood there, looking like he regretted opening his mouth. I turned back to Ethan, whose eyes were now filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time: vulnerability. The man who once had all the answers, who thought he could control everything, was now standing in front of me, broken. "You have no idea what you've done," I said softly, my anger finally giving way to exhaustion. "You took everything from me. My trust, my sense of security, my peace of mind. And you thought I would just sit here and let it happen. You thought I would just accept your betrayal because you were expanding your consciousness." He took a step toward me, his hand outstretched as if to reach for me, but I stepped back. I wasn't going to let him touch me, not after everything. "You're wrong, Ethan," I said, my voice firm. "This is it. We're done." The room went completely still. Even Toby seemed to shrink back, not daring to say anything else. Ethan's face twisted with a mixture of fear and disbelief, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. "You're not going to fix this," I said quietly. "You can't. What you've done is unforgivable." Ethan finally spoke, his voice hoarse, like he was struggling to find words that could make it right. "Sienna, please," he pleaded. I was confused. I didn't mean for this to happen. I shook my head, the finality of it all settling in. "You didn't mean for this to happen. That's what you're going to say?" "No, Ethan, you meant every word. You meant every step you took with Sasha. You made your choice, and now, I'm making mine. I turned to leave, but then I stopped, my hand on the doorframe. And one more thing, I added, looking back at him. I don't care if you're sorry now. I don't care if you regret it. This isn't about me forgiving you. This is about you facing the consequences of your actions. Without another word, I walked out of the house. The air outside felt different, fresher, like I had just stepped out of a dark room into the light. It wasn't a relief exactly. There was still so much to process, so much that was left hanging in the balance. But it was the first step toward reclaiming my life, toward healing from everything he'd done. Over the next few days, everything moved quickly. The lawyer filed the papers, and Ethan's world started to crumble. I knew he was scrambling, trying to figure out how to fix things, how to make it all go back to the way it was. But there was no going back, not for me. One evening, as I sat in the shop, working on a custom build, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jessica. "How's everything going?" she asked. I smiled to myself as I typed back, "It's done. I'm free." Her response came almost instantly. "I'm proud of you. You deserve all the happiness in the world." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I put my phone down and looked around the shop. The sound of the engines, the feel of the metal in my hands, this was my world now. This was where I felt whole, where I could be myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own future. Ethan's calls continued to come in, but I didn't pick up. I didn't need to hear his excuses anymore. I had made my decision. I was moving on, and nothing, not even him, was going to hold me back. That night, after everything had settled, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, reflecting on everything that had led up to this moment. The betrayal, the anger, the pain, it was all a part of my story now. But it didn't define me. What defined me now was my strength. The strength to walk away, the strength to rebuild. I was starting over, and this time, I was doing it for me. It had been a few weeks since everything changed. The papers were signed, the house was mine, and the shop was busier than ever. Ethan's calls and messages had stopped. His family, after their initial attempts at persuasion, seemed to have accepted my decision. The quiet in my life was almost deafening, but it was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of the shop doors creaking open, the hum of machines, and the scent of fresh paint. The rhythm of my work had become a kind of therapy. Each custom build I finished, each motorcycle that rolled out of the shop, felt like a victory. It wasn't just about the bikes. It was about reclaiming my life. But the past still lingered in the back of my mind. Some days, it felt like I could almost forget, like the person I had been before was a different version of me. But then there were the nights when the silence in the apartment pressed in too hard, and I remembered Ethan. I remembered how I had once believed in us, and then I'd shake it off. I couldn't afford to look back anymore. There was no room for what could have been. I had to stay focused on the future, on rebuilding, on finding out who I was outside of him. I spent more time with Jessica, leaning on her when the doubts started to creep in. She had always been the person who knew what to say. She had always been the one who didn't judge, who didn't try to fix me. One evening, she invited me over for dinner at her apartment. We sat on her couch, 2 glasses of wine between us, talking about everything and nothing. After a while, she stopped, looking at me with that familiar intensity. "Do you ever miss him?" she asked, her voice quiet but probing. I hesitated. The question hung in the air like a weight, and for a moment, I wondered if I did miss him. "Sometimes," I said slowly, the truth of it slipping out before I could stop it. "I miss the life we built. The person I thought he was. But not him. Not anymore." She nodded, as if she understood that part of me that still held on, even when I knew I shouldn't. "You're not that person anymore, Sienna," she said gently. "And you don't have to be. You're becoming something better." Her words settled over me like a blanket. Something better. I hadn't thought about it like that. I had spent so long defining myself by what I had lost that I hadn't realized how much I had gained. I had my business. I had my independence. I had my peace. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And in that moment, I realized something important. I was ready to move forward. Not just in my work, but in my life. It was time for me to step into the future, without looking back. The past had shaped me, but it no longer had a hold on me. I wasn't just the woman who had been betrayed. I wasn't just the wife who had been left behind. I was Sienna Ward, and I was building something of my own. I spent the next few weeks taking small steps toward the future I had imagined for myself. I started traveling again, visiting new places, meeting new people. I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under years of compromise. And it felt good. It felt freeing. And then, one evening, I received a message. It was from Ethan. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," it said. "I know I messed up, and I regret how I treated you. I want to apologize. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I'm sorry." I read the message twice, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to respond, to lash out, to remind him of everything he had done. But then I paused. I thought about what I had gained since that night. The strength I had found within myself. I typed a response, my fingers moving swiftly over the keys. "I appreciate your apology, but I don't need it. I've moved on, and I'm okay. I'm better than okay." I hit send before I could second guess myself. The next day, I received another message. This one was different. It was from someone else. Harris. "I heard about everything with Sasha," he wrote. "I just wanted to let you know that I ended things with her. It wasn't right, and I should have known better. I wanted to apologize for everything she did, for being a part of it." I sat there for a moment, stunned. I didn't know how to respond. He was apologizing for something I hadn't even known about. Something that felt so far removed from my life now. But there was something in his message that felt genuine. Something that gave me a sense of closure I hadn't expected. I typed back, "Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it." The conversation ended there, but it felt like the final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Ethan's apology. Harris's message. They were all part of the past. Part of the story I was leaving behind. And as I stood outside the shop that evening, looking at the sunset, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just moving on. I was growing. I was finding my own path, one that didn't depend on anyone else's validation. I was ready for whatever came next. I didn't know exactly where this journey would take me, But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was strong. I was independent. And I was finally free.